Fire. And on the panel, do you know, I'm not seeing Fakria, and I know she's here. She's in the, go and get her from the dining room, please. She's originally Somalian. She's a psychotherapist. If you go and check her work, Oxford and Cambridge, everybody is looking for her. Eh? She's also one of the founders of the most important anti-FGM charity in the UK. She looks out for women, African women. She's there for them, supporting. You heard what we were saying yesterday with Oyinkan Braithwaite. She's always there. It's like African women. Shine. Join me in. So have you been watching those our short videos that we've been putting out there? There's one woman, you know, she said this thing about coming to Kaba Fest over and over and over. In fact, me, I'm not thinking a lot of years ahead, but when I heard her speak about Kaba Fest and how much she had enjoyed herself, the other thing is that I just found her face to be so watchable. So I think I watched that video about 6 times. Just once, twice, thrice, I just kept watching it. Amazing woman who's joining us. I mean, what I love is when our women just shine, you know? When we can, when the guys come and they can look at them and say, yes, we have amazing women, especially in this northern Nigeria, because they definitely exist. Join me in welcoming Hussaina Maina. Fire. Do you think we should, every time we call a woman, I think we should say that, fire. Yeah? Fire. When it's the men, we say water. And, of course, the woman who, I don't know, it's so funny when we talk with each other, and when I reference some of my friends, and we're in our 40s, we can say, you this girl, you know. Oh, girl, you can say all that. But, do you know, I just take offense when a man refers to a woman as a girl. It just takes something away from you. You guys, honestly, it's something to think about. Never do it. Because you won't refer to a grown man as a boy. So we need to stop minimizing our women and taking away their essence. Please join me in welcoming this person who I think for many men, she's a Twitter terrorist. But she's amazing. She has so much to say, and we love her. Fakria Hashim. Fire! Fire! In fact, bonfire! Before we start, we have to do that thing again that we did yesterday. Because I just want to love you all. Can you just move closer? Come on. You, I see you at the back. You in particular, it's you, yes. Yes, you. I'm looking at you. And I want to love you. Come closer. No. You 2 men there. Come here. Just come closer. Look at them. Handsome. Handsome water. Eh? Oh yeah, you are waiting for me to beg you. Come closer. Oh yeah, Abu, Hawa, come on now. Awal rather, thank you so much. Just a little closer so that we don't disrupt the recording. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Those of you over there, please. Please. I see you. Come closer, please. Prince, good?
Good morning, everybody. How's everyone doing? We all slept and recovered from yesterday, Abby. I think that one of the very significant things that yesterday's conversation on consent showed was that number one, there's a lot of anger. And that number two, there's still a lot of presumptions around how men should negotiate women's bodies or engage with women's bodies. And I think that we're at a point where we're seeing an acknowledgement of this situation and people who are quite simply just tired of putting up with it. And so I'm really excited about today's conversation because we're going to be talking about the problem with silence. And we're working within the context of Arewa Me Too, but also within the context of Leila's work with FGM survivors. And we're going to be talking around secrecy, around shame, and again, around this very interesting concept of the ownership of women's bodies. And this is, I think, probably the first time that there are more men in this room than women, so I think it's going to be a very interesting conversation. Yes? All right, we'll try and behave. We'll try.
Behaved women never did anything right anyway.
This is true.
They never made history, sorry.
So, for Gri, I'm going to start with you. Yesterday, you talked about how your beginning Arewa Me Too was somewhat accidental, but it has been a whirlwind of a journey since then. Can you just tell us a little bit about that journey from then to where you are now with how you see sexual violence around women in the North?
So it's been quite an intriguing journey. I mean, the past few months, I've had to engage people that I never thought I would engage. People with, very misogynistic points of view, people that truly do not understand what it's like to be assaulted. But, I mean, over time, I've learned that, in order to engage people, sometimes we would have to come down to their level and be diplomatic about it. So, and it gets really hard to do that sometimes. But then you have to think about the fact that we have to engage people because people make up our society. And if we're trying to impact anything, we'd have to sit down and actually talk with even those that we really don't want to talk to. So that has been quite something for me. What is interesting is, at the first few months of, the Arewa Me Too gaining a lot of traction, I would have conversations with a lot of guys, a lot of my friends, and they would keep asking me questions about, the variants of sexual harassment and, sexual assault, and asking me, okay, I've done this. Do you think that falls into that category? I'll be like, well, yes, or, no. And then I'll have friends telling me about the conversation that was happening on a football field, and it's about harassment and how guys are keeping guys in check when it comes to sexual assault. And I remember a few months, Hassana, sent me a message and was telling me about, a party they had in a neighbor's party where a girl was, being assaulted. And what's changed now is that the guys there did not ignore it. So normally they would, because it's something that's been normalized, but now, they jumped on the guy. So that shows you, a stark shift in the perceptions of people, and especially the ones that we're connected to, the ones that we're able to reach to. But Arewa Me Too had to take a different turn, because as much as the conversation online is very crucial, we have to take it offline. So that's when we started engaging communities and, different organizations that have been working around gender-based violence in the past decades and exploring where the gaps exist. So not really trying to reinvent the wheel or, start a different kind of advocacy, but really leveraging on existing structures that they have put in place. Because when I have conversations with women from Rapa that have been, working around gender-based violence in the past 20 years, they tell you, they relay institutional memory. And then you get to understand that without their work, we wouldn't get to this stage we are now, that we're starting to have the conversation, in public spaces. So what we're doing is we're riding on their backs.
That's such a very thoughtful way to engage with it, where you're recognizing that there's work that has been done before and that you can stand on that to build. And Leila, I'm going to ask you a little bit later about men's sense of where men don't see things as harassment. But before then, I want to talk to you, Hassana, about your work, which is very much centered in schools. How do you see, what kind of relationship do you see that young women have with their bodies, where, we're talking about assault and we're talking about sexual violence? What kind of relationships do you see young women having with their bodies, where they're able to say, these are acts of violence being taken out on me? And do you see men being, or young boys being then sincerely ignorant that their behavior is harassment?
Okay, good morning, everyone. I remember when I started going to school, it was after Fakriya's tweet went viral and a whole lot of people started sharing their experiences with respect to sexual violence. And what I looked at and the stories I read are mostly young children of between the ages of as little as 4 years old, 5, 6, 7. And I realized that we don't get to know about these things because there's this culture of shame and silence. So children don't talk about sex. We don't talk about sex with little children. We assume they don't know. So I wanted to do something. I was on break, and I got a team of young people together in Maiduguri, and we started going to schools, and we started talking to young people about sexual violence, letting them know, especially young girls, that they own their body. Now this is where it gets interesting, because we are telling young girls that they own their bodies, but then they go back home and their mothers tell them, you have to keep your virginity for your husband. Now, we are not advocating for sexual purity for young girls for themselves, but we're advocating for sexual purity for young girls for someone else. Now, with children, it is very complicated when these things happen, because we live in a society where older men call younger girls my wife. So if she's keeping her virginity for her husband, who then is her husband? We should stop confusing little children. They are not dumb, they understand. So I got to school and I encouraged them to sort of write their stories, and it is demoralizing to realize that a whole lot of young people, a whole lot of young children have been sexually assaulted, first by people they know, and then by other strangers, even principals in school and teachers. Imagine a teacher spanking a young girl on her butt. So these things I encourage, because we don't make women feel like their bodies are their own. And if a woman doesn't feel like the body is her own, then she can't protect it. How would you protect something that is not yours? We train young girls into thinking their bodies belong to
the entirety of your body
to their husbands. So young girls grow up thinking their husbands own their body vis-a-vis their vagina, and these things are sort of.
So it's yeah. I think that has been the most heartbreaking thing, that you're seeing, again, children as young as 4 and 6, whose sense of self, already so fragile, has been shifted by, and you're very right, this ingrained teaching that you're keeping your body for someone else. Leila, your work has seen this happen many, many times, where men feel that they own women's bodies to the extent that they're cutting, parts of these bodies. So can you talk to me about those perspectives, how you have observed them, what conclusions, that you're drawing from them?
again, also, I'm someone who accidentally ended up in this work. I think that there's a current theme going on. And I think, again, and it stems from people trying to control our bodies. But I want to take it a little bit further. It wasn't just controlling our bodies. I think people need to differentiate controlling a girl's body versus controlling a woman's bodies, girls' sexuality. There's a difference. And I think that's what when we're having this conversation, we really need to call it for what it is to control female sexuality. This is very much connected to power, okay? The idea that we still live in a world, in order to control a girl, we have to remove body parts. Like 2019, every 11 seconds, a girl will undergo female genital mutilation. I mean, we should be absolutely outraged about this. However, so why do men feel they need to? Imagine being born a boy. So you're already born privileged the moment you come out of your mother's vagina. We like to call it what it is around here. Imagine being in a world where you're constantly told, this is not your fault, you're the man of the house, you're this, you control the women, you're the head of the house, she's the neck girl. I mean, we have all the craziest sayings. We feed these boys this kind of power. And actually, there's in the UK, actually, there's a movement with a couple of clinicians like myself who are trying to get power to be recognized as a form of addiction. It really is an addiction. It really is an addiction. Because we feel if we don't have this power over somebody, then we cannot identify ourselves as a man or as a human being. So that has to be recognized. So if you are born and raised in an environment where you're constantly fed power, but what you're watching as a man, it's the opposite, this woman who has no power. So you're already told, in order for you to have a power, you must control this person. And that's really, so in my work, and I actually done some work with men over the years, and thanks to amazing artists and creative people, I remember one of the things that I done a couple of years ago was I created something called the Vagina Gallery. And we divided it into 4 sections. Oh, yes. And the reason I actually called it that, because fundamentally, while we are picked on to be judged, or we are guilty of something, or we are mutilated or raped or something's happened because that part of our body. I wanted boys to take a journey with me on why this actually happened. So we used plasticine vulvas where I started performing FGM right in front of them. And you can see the shock on these boys because they really didn't understand.
There's no mental...
Right. There's an argument here. We must teach boys about women's rights and human rights. However, we must not get in this conversation that men don't know women don't have rights, because that's how women were brought up in the first place, for them to have power. So I think it's important we don't confuse both conversations.
Yeah, this is so interesting to me because, again, we're seeing an acknowledgement of this long-standing way of being where it has always been. And you're saying, we're not going to accept any of that. You know, you guys have done this for long enough. Now for Kriya, a lot of the resistance to your work has been people questioning your rights to say to men that you don't own women's bodies, to say to women that you have to teach women and you own your body. And I'm understanding you then wanting to engage at a level that acknowledges cultural, like, established norms. How do you draw the line between saying, I'm going to speak to you in a way that you will understand, that between that and pandering to an already established way of being, you know?
So one of the experiences we had over the past few months, so we go to a lot of meetings where we just engage organizations, individuals, right? So with a lot of them, you see that they really don't understand they don't understand the manifestation of these variants of sexual assault.
Do you think they don't understand or they don't acknowledge?
I think there's some, they don't understand it, but then you have, a pool of people that do understand it, but then, it's this thing about privilege that people never want to let go of, the the power that society has sort of vested in them. So they would try their absolute best to push back against it. So one of the interesting things that I noticed, or repulsive, to put it, was that, so when the conversation is going on online, and the attacks start coming in. So when young girls try to get into the conversation, especially young girls from universities around the north and all of that, you find these young boys, they're around the same age, attacking them personally, and to me, when I see that, it's heartbreaking that the young girls then start to apologize. And to me, that's us leaping forward and then jumping back. Because then these girls have garnered the courage to actually speak out, and now you're bullying them into silence. They start to attack them, and then they keep silent.
Most people will attack when their way of thinking is...
Exactly. And then but I'd have to go into their messages and try to speak to them, don't let them push you back, because that's what they want. They acknowledge the fact that a lot more young girls are being more outspoken, and culturally that impedes on that privilege that they're trying to protect. So they would do anything to cower the girls into receding back to their shells.
Okay, Layla's wanting to respond to you.
I think also, I just want to go back a little bit about the comment, do they understand this is sexual assault or not? I think, from my experience, they do, but it's just been normalized and it's been made okay for them to behave like, because the society around you makes it okay. And also, I just wanted to pick up on a point actually that was mentioned yesterday that's very much connected to this. I think there was a comment that was made, when you go through sexual assault, it affects you for the rest of your life. As a therapist, when I work with my clients on this issue, and I'm a survivor of it myself, what damages or silences people is not the act of sexual assault, it's how society reacts to it. It's the shame, it's the guilt that we put on girls. Because when we get other physical attacks, it doesn't traumatize us for the rest of our lives. But why is it when we are sexually assaulted, it has a devastating long-term effects? It's because of the way we respond. And that's exactly what you're referring to, because silencing is really one of the biggest killers of this continent, with lots of issues. So I'm forever trying to create a safe space where we can have very uncomfortable conversations. Because what we do in these spaces sometimes, we are constantly trying to make sure someone is okay, I don't offend you. Unfortunately, we're going to offend each other, especially when our children are being attacked, molested, assaulted. And another thing I'm forever challenging on politicians is the language we use when we talk about these issues. This is not child marriage. There's nothing marriageable about a child. It's called pedophilia. There's actual terminology for it. We need to start calling it that, okay? Because the moment we put the word marriage on it, we're making it a little bit okay.
Legitimize it, yeah.
We legitimize it. Domestic violence, it's not domesticated. It's pure violence. There's no honor killing. It's a murder. There's nothing honorable, because those titles are usually put on marginalized groups. Especially this continent, I'm forever telling politicians, stop calling it child marriage. It's not child marriage, because the moment you put pedophilia on that document, you will have to have a different action for it.
Yes.
Because when we talk about, the reason again silencing happens when we talk about this conversation, we are forever again negotiating our bodies. Even in the UK, the land of liberals, I mean, we apparently have a prime minister who potentially is a feminist. I don't know. That's up for a conversation. But I've had conversation at the Home Office where they said to me, oh, Layla, we need to talk about, we need to talk to the community leader, we need to talk to the local imam. And I said, one day I just walked off and I said, I am not negotiating my vagina with nobody. I am sorry, and we are not negotiating our children's lives with these men. And this is the problem, because the moment you use the word child marriage, domesticated violence, honor killing, what it does, it really minimizes the real issue that we're dealing with, and that's what causes the silence.
Hassan, do you see that happening in the work that you do, where then there's a tendency to say, oh, it's not, yeah, okay, yes, we know it's bad, but because I'm frustrated at a response to sexual violence that still centers men as the ones who must be acknowledged and negotiated from. It frustrates me that even where there is a woman who is dealing with trauma, we still have to say to the men around her, you need to stop, you know this is not. So do you feel that that is happening in the work that you're doing, where you're being encouraged then to try and make it not so bad?
I wanted to add a comment to when Leila is speaking. I can't help but agree. You know, I tell these young children, young kids, that these people that abuse you trust your silence. They trust that you won't tell anything to nobody. And because they trust that silence, that's why they do it over and over and over again. And I was telling Daisy yesterday, we were talking about it, and I'm like, they groom you. First, they will start by licking your fingers, and then you'd think, well, is it innocent? Am I overreacting? Why do we always feel like we're overreacting? Why don't we just react as women? Why is it that you would feel, why do you even have to gauge your reaction? I mean, they say anger is not attractive, but who cares if you're attractive or not? What is the thing about being attractive as a woman? So when I tell young people that they trust your silence, I give them example of so many issues that happen. Like a young girl wrote this story about her friend. Now, this is where language gets interesting. This girl is 13, and she wrote a story about her friend who is, in her words, having an affair with her uncle. Now, I wonder who put that word affair into the girl's head. The girl is 13, and her uncle is a so-called doctor in the University of Maiduguri, and he's assaulting this young girl. Now, she wrote the story about her friend, then she ended it with a personal pronoun, so what do you think I should do? I mean, the moment I read that, I knew something was off. So I wanted to have a conversation, walk all over you. I like that you're such a strong girl. And she was like, Auntie, can I tell you something? I'm like, yeah, come on, talk to me. And she was like, well, the girl in that story is actually me. And
so she's already in a place where she's taking ownership of an act of assault being done to her.
Right. She's 13. She's still a child. Now, we got to and fro. We started having conversations. We took the case up, NAPTIP, the police. Now, the police in your country said that a girl of 10 years can have a relationship with a man, that apparently he's giving her gifts, so whatever he does is allowed. Now, we had to go and come back with a lawyer. Well, I'm not yet a lawyer. We had to go and come back with a certified lawyer, and the story changed. So we kept on going back and forth. Now, then the principal of the school called me and was like, I have to calm down. They walk about these things all the time, and it is a family issue. How is a criminal offense a family issue? I mean, I had to go back to year 3 criminal law, and I mean, rape is a
go
state
back to the
offense.
basics.
Right, it's basics. Like, why do you say it's a family issue?
But isn't that, can I stop it? But isn't that how the law has always been written? It was always to protect the men.
Right.
It's always been able to, and in the UK, there's actually a big challenge around the domestic violence bill, because the domestic violence bill, so I'll give you a scenario. If a strange man beat me up right now, black and blue, it's an assault, he'll be done by the authorities, whether I report him or not, because he committed a crime. But if the one with the title, the boyfriend, the husband, or the partner, unless I report it, even though they can physically see I'm black and blue, he goes free. So who is that bill actually protecting?
Right.
It's protecting men again. Even with, with sexual assaults. Again, the perpetrators are protected, because the women is expected to give evidence.
Right.
How do you give evidence after you were assaulted?
Right.
And you know, there's a thing about the fact that it's like marriage is made to strip a woman of her rights. Remove the marriage from the picture, and or any kind of relationship of on a woman, and then it's okay. All of a sudden, it's like marriage takes away the human rights.
Right. So
Again, it's that power. I think we have to remember
Right.
this is about
It's about
power. This is what we're talking about.
at the end of the day, it is about power. Sorry, let
Please
me
go on.
finish.
Mhm.
So I realized, and then I started having conversations with people about this particular young girl. And what irked me so much was people wanted to know if she was a virgin. So somehow, if she's a virgin, what
Then
her
it's a
uncle has been
crime.
doing to her is legitimate.
Oh,
But if
oh.
she is not, I mean, why do we always have to? I mean, women go through so much, yeah? And
No, how long do we have?
and it's something that we all should be angry about. But I'm actually really angry that young girls are subjected to this. It is no difference if a young girl or an old woman or a middle-aged woman is raped. But our children, innocence is not guaranteed, especially young girls. They're required to grow more than how boys are required to grow. So it's
Again, so you have, how old was she? 13.
13.
She is taking ownership of this man's assault. Everybody around you is saying to you, why are you making this such a big deal? Like, why are you carrying it on your head? Because it's something that happens. So where's the point where we then flip this on its head? Because women will go through, the average woman, if we did a poll in this room, I don't know that there's any woman that does not have an account of sexual assault. But the first thing you do is you absorb it. You know, it's your shame. It's your, you hold it. And then if you're fortunate, again, to meet somebody who's an advocate, it gives you
And
a
it's
little
a
bit of
child.
space.
I think we have to remember it's children
This
we're
is a
talking about
child.
mostly. This is children.
You know, but it's also this thing where you're realizing that whether this is a 4-year-old girl or 25-year-old woman, it's the same, yes. And these men are engaging with these children from whatever age with no acknowledgement of their youth. So where do we now, how do we spin this around where it stops becoming it's okay, or it's child marriage, or it happens all the time, to where we can now say what you are doing is a crime and should be treated as such? You want to?
Yes.
Okay.
I think women need to own their bodies and they need to do it unapologetically. We need women to say, and you have to be careful to not let people police what you wear. Now, I have been...
Hassan, I want to ask a question, just as you're going. Yesterday, we saw here on this panel, people saying, I was out in a car politicking, somebody took a picture and sent it to my you talked about how somebody sent a picture of your billboard to your father. There's this constant thing where you're being checked by for daring to step out.
Right.
How do you own, thank you, a full-grown adult. So how do you own your body unapologetically in a system that is fighting you, checking you?
That you have to be yourself first. I remember having this conversation with my father when I was as little as 16. And I was like, Dad, I think constantly women cannot be women. And he said, so what do you mean? And I'm like, well, as a young girl, you're under the care of your father. And after that, you're under the so-called care of your husband. So when are you actually allowed to be a woman? When are you actually allowed to leave? When are you actually allowed to go out and say, I want to just walk freely out at night without looking at the time and thinking, oh, my child needs to be breastfed, or oh, I need to go and breastfeed my husband, because... So at the end of the day, when are women allowed to be women? And I was having a conversation yesterday with Zara, and she said sometimes you just have to tell yourself, I'm old enough to leave.
I think we need to allow women to be humans. That's what
I think,
But you're going to answer this for me. But my concern is, we are talking about murders called honor killings. You're talking about a culture where the repercussions often feel too big to be worth it. You know, rather than your whole community shaming you for being loose enough to be raped, just swallow it and be going. You know, with that context, how do you? What's your response?
So I had an interesting encounter in a community that sort of branded a rape community, right? It's a cluster 5 neighboring communities in one, and all of those communities have had very high cases of rape, and it's not insiders of the community that are doing the raping. It's girls on their way to school a few miles away that get raped on their way by you know, armed robbers, you know, those people that have been terrorizing the communities. So what I realized is, because it's outsiders that have been perpetuating that crime, it brought them as a community closer, right? Because there you have...
It wasn't an uncle or a brother.
Yeah, it brought them together. And, you know, you would walk into the community and they'll show you a young child being tended to, and they'll be like, well, someone raped her mother and she gave birth to her or him. So it's that the chief's daughter had been raped. The average person has been raped there. Everyone is getting raped in that community, and it's not from people from within the community. So that has sort of brought them together to a point where they don't shame, they don't stigmatize. Even within the community, you know, they're marrying each other, knowing that, okay, she has a child, and, you know, that child was born out of rape. So but, you know, you find that when it's the other way around, you won't get the same reaction. There isn't that feeling of we're in this together, because
the issue
it's
is
an
not
insider.
that there is an
Yes.
assault. The issue
Yes.
is that the assault is by somebody who is not considered is not on the list of acceptable violators.
Yes, yes. And, you know, what's very common in northern Nigeria, and I've spoken to so many people, is that a lot of the young girls that are being raped, sometimes the boys, the perpetrator is always from inside the house. If it was someone from the outside, they wouldn't get the same reaction of pushing them into silence. But it's because it's from within. And then it becomes a matter of, okay, this will bring us shame. We don't want people to talk about us. And this is something that has been going on for decades, for as long as we can all remember. We sat down, we had a conversation with a group of friends, and unfortunately, all of us had undergone that experience from inside our homes. So the first time we got to know about sexual violence was when we were as young as 6, 5, because someone touched you somewhere and it was inappropriate. But it didn't really ring until we started talking about sexual violence. Then we began to understand that, okay, you don't really have to be penetrated to be assaulted. There are variants to it. So understanding that God is, you know, talking about it, and that's, I believe that's what has, you know, sort of sparked that really massive conversation, not just in northern Nigeria, but all around the world. Because, you know, it just started someplace in the West, you know, somewhere far from us, but somehow it has affected all of us, because they have, you know, they started a conversation that we could relate to, even though we share very little in terms of culture. But it's an experience that every single woman in this world can understand. And that's why, you know, that's why when we sit down and we're having a conversation with men and they're refusing to understand, it's because they, you know, on one hand, okay, you have probably done it, right? And it's been okayed. It's normalized in our society. But then, on the other, you're blatantly being arrogant and ignorant about it, because you haven't been assaulted. You don't know what it's like to walk
But again,
from one point to the other without being touched, or without being afraid that, okay, someone would jump on you. We had, there was a kidnapping that happened to students from Abu Zaria a few days ago. And what did they, one of the first things they said was, okay, we have young girls, and if you don't pay the ransom, we'll rape them. So, sexual assault, rape, is a weapon, whether it's in conflict or in peacetime. It's always a weapon against women. It's a power struggle, because people keep asking, okay, but what do you see in a child that you would go and touch them or rape them? But that's the thing. When it comes to power, it's about vulnerability. You look for whoever you perceive as the most vulnerable. That's why in our boarding secondary schools, especially the ones that are segregated, you find out that a lot of young boys in GS1, GS2, they just started school, and they get attacked, they get raped, because there's they get that feeling of vulnerability. And that's what a lot of these pedophiles, rapists, see in young children. It's that power that they hold against them.
No, I think in terms of obviously how do we address this? It's at different levels. Political will has to happen. Our politicians absolutely, because we put them there, we voted for them. They have to do something about this. But also, in order. One thing I've learned from this, and I'm happy to share this experience with you, this is something that happened within our household. So my daughter was actually attacked at school by a boy, sexually attacked. There was an attempt. Obviously, the first thing she did was, she didn't actually tell me, she told my brother. And she said, obviously, I found out why. She said, if you tell mummy, she's going to kill the boy, basically. And obviously, when he told me, obviously, he sat me down with her, and he told me what happened. And the first reaction, obviously, she was absolutely right. I wanted to kill him. I actually wanted to kill him. And my brother had to remind me. He said, no, you've instilled something in her that she can come and tell you. Because I thought, I blamed myself as a mother that I didn't do enough to protect her. I was like, oh my God, what did I not do? Didn't I tell her this? Didn't I give her that information? Because no, because Layla, you're forever talking about safe spaces where you have these uncomfortable conversations. But the fact that she can come and tell me about this. So the reason I'm telling you this story is, all of us in this room have a responsibility to teach our children from a very young age, no one is allowed to touch their body. No one. Any part of their body is not allowed. The reason we need to lobby our politicians, because this should be in our school curriculum. Children should be, it's our fundamental right to know how to protect ourselves. No offense, algebra hasn't done me any good. And I spent hours learning algebra. It did not stop me from crazy relationships or, I wish I learned more about, manipulative relationships. That would have been much more useful. So our education system plays a massive role, So for me, it's super important that it starts at a very young age. The reason a lot of us maybe didn't speak out or say anything, can you imagine at the age of 7, I was pinned down and I was cut and I thought that was normal. Imagine the psyche of the kind of grooming that happened to a lot of us, thinking that was okay. We should be outraged. So I use my daughter's story as an example for her. And I remember the way she intervened with me on this situation. I wanted to kill him, and I said, oh my God, there's sexual assault that's been committed. She said, wait. She goes, he violated me, and that's what happened. And she told me, he's a child, man, he's 13. We need to find out why he behaved the way he did.
Oh, wow.
Do you know why? Oh yeah, by the way, I did the other thing. Oh, we must take it to a psychologist. We need to make sure, you don't feel the... She goes, I don't need to go. She goes, I didn't do anything wrong. Do you see what I mean? Because I instilled it from day one. The moment you do that, because we can't stop crime. We can never get rid of any crime. But what we can do, what we can all do is make sure our daughters or our boys, when they are violated in such a way, we don't shame and silence them. So for me, the outcome of that whole experience was, she could come and tell someone straight away. And that's the most important. But that's only one example. But imagine if we did that from a very young age for all our children. And we must remember, sexual assault happens within our own families. 98% of actual sexual assaults happen within our own household. Only someone that knows you can catch you in that vulnerable moment. Because we were always told about the person who's gonna sexually attack me is someone who's gonna jump from the bushes. In London, I don't even live near trees. It's like, that was never gonna happen. But it's that idea that it's some boogeyman who's gonna do it. But actually, It's always someone very close to you. Yes.
We're going to round up with you, actually, and then we can go to questions. I know you want to say something, but in addition to that, how do you teach parents how to be safe spaces in a culture that already demonizes, puts the burden and the shame on the victims? How do you teach parents to be safe spaces? So go ahead and say what you want to say, and then just give us your thoughts.
Okay, I think fundamentally the way we teach boys to protect themselves, we have to teach girls to protect themselves. I think we're doing so much by telling girls or lying to them that a man would protect you or your husband would protect you. Now, what happens in situations where women need protection from their husband? I mean, we see a lot of violence that happen in domestic settings. So what happens if you need protection from your husband? So I think the whole idea of a Superman, or the whole idea of that romantic partner that would come and take away your pains and sorrow and all of that, we need to teach young girls to protect themselves. Now, I remember when I was in primary school, we had taekwondo classes, and I was the only girl that was going for taekwondo classes. And every day, if my father came to pick me up from school, and I'm like, I'm not going back there. I'm not going. And he's like, you're going to have to go back there. You have to learn to protect yourself. Now, I didn't know how that helped me. I can't fight, but I can talk. So, yeah. So I have learned to tell people to stop. I have learned to stop internalizing so many things as my fault. Now, we have a lot of situations where even parents think it's the fault of young girls when they say the girl is acting too grown. How can a girl act too grown? Or when they say, why is she wearing this? I mean, she's 14, she's 12, why is she dressing like she's 20? Why do we have dress code for girls at all ages? Why is it that when a girl is at this particular age, she has to wear this, and if she's this, she has to wear... I mean, these are the things that make us what we are. This is what's messing up the society. So parents have to learn to stop internalizing unnecessary fear into their children. They have to learn to stop teaching their children silence, and they have to learn to listen. Because if you do not listen to your children, these kids are intelligent. They talk if you can only listen to them. And you can only listen to them if you know yourself. And that is why your mental health as a parent is very important. That's why I always tell men, don't go around dropping up your kids if you can't take... I mean, parenting is both father and mother. So we need to have a situation whereby parents are mentally ready to parent before they even go through the process of childbirth. So if we can have more engaging parents, and we would be able to, we have parents that are trying to be progressive, I think it's going to go a long way. Now, another short story about my late aunt. She has a son who, whenever anything happens, now my aunt used to, she reacts like Layla. So even when someone does something to me, I don't go telling my aunt, because I will kill him. Who is he? Give me his number. So we have learned not to tell her stuff that if we don't want the person dead, except if we want the person to die. So, but she has this young son, and we were working out one day. We went to buy Capri Sun, and there were some young children just came out from Islamia, an Islamic school, and there was a girl in their middle, and boys cycled her, and they were bullying her. And he was holding my hand. I didn't know when he slipped out of my hand, and he went into the cycle and he dragged them. Now he said this in Hausa, and this boy is 8.
You have to help me
So
now.
is that what your mother told you to do? Is that how you would treat your wife? And when I had to narrate the story to her, and she's like, yes, because I noticed because I tell him he's strong all the time, so because he thinks he's strong, he used to bully on girls. So I had to tell him, no, your strength is not to bully girls, your strength is to protect girls. So I think if my aunt can do that alone, I think parents need to learn how to do that. Thank you.
Can I just add
yes, to round up, and then wow.
So
Okay.
So I think, and peaceful zones. But what we don't realize is, that silence has a grievous cost on our society, our productivity as a society, and especially, that impacts our economy, right? We like to see sexual violence as a crime against one person, but we reduce what it actually is. But it's a crime on society, and one way or the other, it spreads and impacts the bigger society. So, and silence is really where it begins at, because if we don't know how many people are being assaulted, we don't really have a true picture of just the amount of rot that we're dealing with. And when we don't do that, we have a rotten justice system. And then, it's a vicious cycle, because when you know that you're not gonna get justice, you'd rather, not end up with nothing. Putting yourself out there in a society that will most certainly stigmatize you and shame you, and then, having to go through that trauma at every point within the family, your community, the justice system. So we need to see sexual crimes for what they are, an impediment on the development of our society.
All right, so yes, we're going to take questions. Yes, I'm going to ask again to please be respectful of time, and to give others an opportunity. How long do I have? How long do we have left? Okay, I'm also going to say this, and it's only because of the circumstances of the conversation that we're having, and I'm invoking moderator privileges. If you know that your comment is going to be to diminish or dismiss sexual violence, this is not the right forum. I'm saying it now. All right? Okay. No, we're not playing.
Thank you. My question is how we can get other institutions to. There are a lot of institutions that promote silence as well. And I'm saying this as someone who has worked with the police and other institutions that are supposed to promote, that's supposed to go against, sexual abuse. So how do we get the police, for example? I've noticed just from working, so I work with an organization in Lagos called Stand to End Rape. And I've noticed that even the police does not know how to deal with cases of abuse. So we had a survivor who walked into the police station, and the woman in charge did not know what she was supposed to do. So how do we get institutions like that are supposed to protect the rights to also, they sort of promote silence because they are unaware of what to do. Sometimes they deliberately perpetrate it as well. So how do we get them involved? How do we teach them what they're supposed to do, how to respond to these situations?
Okay. So the issue with the police we found is quite systematic, right? So at the police academy, they don't really have, as part of their curriculum, a sensitivity training program that teaches them around the sensitivities. So, and when you have a lot of these civil society organizations that are doing workshops, training the police, but the problem is when you do that, the police are always shuffled, right? So you train police in Lagos and then they're sent to Sokoto. And then the ones that you're getting back in Lagos do not have that training. And civil society does not have the capacity to continue training every single police. So that's why it needs to start from the police academy itself. And, the gender, there is a policy of having gender desks across police stations, but you find that there's only one gender desk in every state, right, at the police command. So what that does is that at the divisional level, that's where you get rape cases. So they don't have that training. And they ask questions like, were you a virgin? What were you wearing? And all of that. So they don't know how to deal with these things. So that's why it's absolutely up to the government and for the people to push the government to actually establish these gender units or sex crime units across divisions, because that's where it's most important, and not just at the center. But that's really how, our system is. Everything is centralized, and we need to learn to decentralize. Even in our communities, we need to take ownership of our communities to be able to check in, sit down, have conversations, with the police, try to enlighten them, because the civil society can only do so much.
Okay, no, just because we have about 10 minutes, and I really want you to answer as many questions as possible. So I know. But let me get as many audience questions so that you all can give feedback, all right?
Thank you. Okay, so because this panel is the problem with silence, I'm going to share a quick story to give like a context. So I was walking to work one day, and I didn't wear a brassiere because, bras are bondage and stuff. So I was just like, and that was my first time.
They really are killers.
That was my first time trying it. And I was going to work, and this man leaning on the car leans up, and he's like, I will suck it very well for you. Yeah, and so I absorbed that, and I was just like, just keep going, and I just kept going. And I took it with me, and it's something I think about every morning. So I know that now that was silence. I shouldn't have been silent. So how should we respond in those situations? So that, because we're trying to get rid of this culture of silence, right? So what do we do?
I have a great idea, guys. We will all want to know how we break the silence, right? Can I make a suggestion? Yes. Why don't we start in this room? Can I make a suggestion? You don't have to follow this rule, but I just want to make, because I think sometimes we can preach at people, but we're not practicing it ourselves. The way to break a silence, you come forward and actually admit what happened to you. So I would like to invite you, if you've experienced any form of sexual assault or there was an attempt to attack you, I would say let's get up right now.
If you've experienced any form of sexual assault, you don't have to, but yes, to stand.
Right. How are we silent? Look at the whole room is up. So this is how we break the silence. We have to be the first ones to get up and say, I was that person, because we cannot expect our younger girls to come forward if we're not admitting what happened to us in the first place. So I would like to say, all of you in this room, and I encourage we all turn to each other and say, it wasn't your fault. It wasn't your fault. It was not your fault. It wasn't your fault. Let's hug. Let's take it out. We have to hug. And that's how we start. That's how we break the cycle of shame. We get up and we absolutely encourage that person that came forward.
All right, thank you. Stephen Angulu, I'm asking this question as someone who grew up among girls, 2 elder sisters and 1 younger sister, and then someone who has cousins, little cousins who are also girls. I heard Maina talking about how her father enrolled her in taekwondo, right? And that's quite plausible for a parent. And she talked about how she was also talking about how when would women or young ladies be finally allowed to be women? I mean, not to get wound up in these cares around. And now I'm asking, where's the balance between being overprotective of our daughters and doing our bits as parents to shield them from this sexual assault? Where's the line? Where do we draw the line? Where's the balance? Thank you.
I would like to thank you for your question, because it's a very good question. Now, I think you are being overbearing and overprotective when you start dictating what women should wear without an explanation. And then when you're, especially with young girls, when you're giving that explanation, it should be out of care. Now, I always talk about my father because he has been very amazing. I remember there was a time we had people in the house and they were working, and I was little and I had towel on my chest. I had just started growing breast, and I left the house to go to the boys' quarters to go and throw something. And my dad called me to the dining table, and he's like, Beauty, if you're inside this house, you can wear anything. But please, since these people they're trespassing our space, just don't go out like that. You know, people are idiots. That's how he talks. So because of that, I have learned that it's not my fault. And because he has talked to me with so much care and compassion, I have understood that. So, but when I go out and people tell me, why are you not with a veil? Now, that is you. It's none of your business. It's none of your business. So.
Hello. My name is Winnie Bivan. Okay, let me start by talking about some things first before I go straight to the question. My question is, now let me talk about the question. What do you do to a child, for instance, that wears miniskirts? You talked about dressing, I remember that. What do you do? Because I believe if a girl wears, a young girl wears short skirts and moves around, there's no how a man outside won't see her and won't be moved. And another issue, yes, no, calm down.
One house. We also need to remember that some of the things we are responding to is because we have had these conversations already. Do you understand what I'm saying? So I'm going to let her finish. Leila, I would like you, especially because you're a mother and because of the work that you do, to give us your perspective. Okay?
Thank you. And another thing, for the men, there are some men that wear shorts, for instance. If they wear shorts out, no, not bomb shorts, shorts. And you see some women, they'll still be moved. So what would you do in that situation? No, seriously, I'm frank about that. What do you do in that situation?
I will give an example that actually happened with my daughter. We were in this Somali shop, and my mom's covered. She wears the burqa. I don't, obviously. My daughter doesn't. And she must have been like 6, 7 years old. She was wearing little shorts and a little vest because it was a hot day. And the guy in the shop said, oh, he actually dismissed me because to him, I'm not even considered as a human being because I didn't wear the hijab. So he looked at my mother and he goes, why isn't your granddaughter like you? And I said, for one, talk to me. I'm her mother. I'm the one who gave birth to her. And he goes, no, but you know, sister, and I love how you become the sister. Yeah, Somalis do the same thing. And he said, but sister, you must remember, you know, there'll be men just near the shop here who are going to look at her. They're going to be attracted. I took out my notepad from work. I said, can you give me their names? Because I need to call the police, because these are pedophiles. I want to know who these men are, because we cannot entertain that kind of... What I'm saying to you is, how a child dresses, if a woman is naked, head to toe, drunk out of her mind, no one has the right to touch her. I don't care how, because it's not about attraction. It's about power again. We must really claim this word now. It's not about sex. It's not about pleasure. It's not about sexuality. It's about controlling somebody. So my response to that man was, I would recommend it to everybody next time someone says that to you about a little girl wearing clothes or anything. Just say, oh, tell me who this person is, because we need to call the police and report them, because this is a pedophile you're referring to.
Hello, everybody. Yes, I wanted to ask, to make this comment yesterday during the consent panel, but I wasn't allowed to, and I went home with a headache. So I was hoping today I would be able to. So when we have these conversations about rape and assault, it's easy to dwell at the extremes. So which means we're always talking about the people being grabbed, being pinned down, and all of that's happening. So I want to know about most women who are assaulted, it's most times manipulative. Absolutely. So in the sense that it's subtle. So it's not, you keep navigating this space where these things are happening here. You're thinking, okay, is this happening? Is it not happening? What's happening here? Then you allow it to continue, because really nothing is happening, but something is happening. That's the problem with that situation. So, and if you react to it, the man will tell you, you are the one who is thinking that way. Yes, you're the one who is seeing something here. But if you don't react to it, it goes to the point where something actually happens, and then you go back and people say, why didn't you react in the beginning? So and if we take a poll and say, okay, how many men have actually grabbed women and raped them in this room? We would have next to maybe nobody, right? But if you have that, most of us don't even understand that that is in itself a form of assault, where you subtly manipulate somebody, and then you know what you are doing, you know what your intentions are, but you keep taking this person to the place, and you keep having that person second guessing all of the actions that are happening within that space. And how do women who are in that situation navigate? Because the truth is, you can't say, what are you saying no to? So that's what I need to know.
We can both answer. So what you're describing actually in the legal term is actually called psychological and emotional abuse. Actually, the UK, we had our first conviction on this after years of lobbying, because people think, again, abuse is something that you're physically attacked. Actually, psychological abuse is actually one of the worst forms of abuse. And the question is, how do women navigate? Again, I'm going to go back to, we have to take the shame away. When we continuously have these conversations, so you coming forward and actually saying that, it's a start. Because a few of us in this room will say, oh yeah, absolutely, I've experienced the same thing. So in my profession, my job is always to create a safe environment for women, because I specifically work with women, where they can have these uncomfortable conversations. So it's not just psychological and emotional abuse, but one abuse I'm constantly seeing is economical abuse also is a real thing that women are constantly faced with.
And sorry, also to add to, when she asked that question, what came to my mind is punch him. Because if a man is assaulted, he would react physically. So women need to learn to do that. And again, I know it feels like, oh, okay, am I attractive if I do that? Hell with that. Attack him, punch him, and call people, shout. Don't keep quiet.
It's self-defense.
Hi.
Uh-oh, Kina. Scared.
So we say society a lot, we say society a lot, but I like to look the problem in the face. And that is that for the vast majority of women, the first crime scene of our lives is the family. Yeah. Yeah. And it will extend to our marital homes. I don't know, that's why you're here. I don't know what the solution is. But I desperately need women to sit with the fact that the first crime scene of your life is going to be your family. The first grooming scene of your life is going to be your family. The first manipulative site is your family. And that the family is one of the most effective weapons that patriarchy has. So, number one, maybe I'm doing solutions, I don't know. Your family is not your protector. Women need to understand your family is not your protector. Nor can you protect your family when they perpetrate crime against someone else. I don't know it makes being a woman very difficult, because oftentimes we are going to be caring and loving the very people that are going to hate us. This is rooted in the hate of women. So I need parents, we are talking a lot about girls. If you're going to have kids, you need to know you are bringing children into a crime scene. That is not about to stop now. I don't know any other solution, but women must stop thinking that there is safe spaces within families.
No, absolutely.
I think openness is very critical to openness about the conversation within our homes, because it's not something that we talk about with our mothers, sometimes even with our sisters, because and I'll revert to what you said about sexuality, because we're ashamed of our sexuality, we're shy, and that impedes the conversation itself. We should be able to talk about sexuality with our parents and with our siblings, because that's what these kind of conversations are what make a safe space, knowing that I can speak to you about anything and everything. So when it comes to any other thing, someone perpetrating something within our homes, we're able to have that conversation. But it really does start with knowing that you can talk to people around you within your very local community of your home.
Hello, my name is Zainab Terry, and Hassana, I want to say something about what you said, that when do women get to be women? Actually, religiously, I was born in the north, I grew up in the north, I'm still in the north, and everything in the north is attached to religion. So when you say you want to be a woman, then you have to exclude yourself from religion. Because in Islam, when a girl is born, like from her childhood to being a married woman, she's under her father, except the father is dead. Then she will be under her brother, her elder brother. It can even be her younger brother. It depends on their age. When she's married, she's now under her husband. And when the husband dies or maybe something happens, she's back under her father. And you said something about, yeah, if she gives birth to her children, she'll be under a male child. So now, I'm not trying to attach this to anything. Like, feminism can be kept aside. So, and about protecting ourselves, we are not as strong as the men. The men, there are strong women, but the majority are stronger than, men are stronger.
Men
So-
hold the power. I think that you have to, is men hold the power.
Yeah.
I think that's what you're.
Yes, yes. Like, no, physically, they are stronger. Yes.
I think there are many exceptions to that. Men are stronger. I think, can I respond to her? I think women are. I think there are many exceptions to this. Men are stronger because I see women go through a whole lot of gruesome activities, and then they still. They give birth out of that tiny hole, and they still come out strong, and they're still okay. But now back to the question of women protecting themselves. I didn't like it when you said we should keep feminism aside, because how can we keep the movement that gives us right to even be here talking? I wouldn't have been able to talk if one woman somewhere didn't think that I was worthy and didn't speak up. And sometimes they even gave up their life for us to be in this room, for us to even talk about our issues. I don't think we should keep feminism aside. And I think we need to have these conversations because we need to encourage discussions with respect to this, especially with, and I still stand by my word, women need to be allowed, because if you are not allowed to be yourself, you cannot be a full human being. So we need to see ourselves through our eyes and not through the interpretation of men. And that's what we have been doing over history. So yes, I still stand by that. Religion has religion
do you
has.
mind if I? Okay.
Can I finish? Okay. Religion has given excuse, has justified slavery, but we're not in chains anymore. So I think conversations like this need to be encouraged, and we need to look at these things through a proper lens. Thank you.
Okay. So before we go,
For Korea, yes, very quickly, yeah.
She asked a very, very important question, because when we're talking about, Arewa Me Too, right? When we look at northern Nigeria, a lot of what rules our lives is religion. Do you mind if I point to someone to actually answer her? Like a scholar in transition. I think it's a very important question that needs to be answered. Mohammed, do you mind?
Mohammed, can you answer? No, just come. Mohammed, can you answer in 1 minute? 1 minute, please.
All right. I think, sorry, I forgot your name. Zainab. I think what Zainab wanted to say was not just under. She's not trying to put it in the kind of a power thing. I think the word you should have used was under the protection. And you actually contradicted yourself about the protection, because when you were narrating a story of your niece, when his mother was telling him that he's been taught to protect women. I think that has already answered your question. Then we have to be under the protection. And please, since I have the opportunity to, I'll ask Faria. Sorry, not Faria. No, I know a long time ago from secondary school, so it's Faria. So I think this Arewa Me Too, I know there was a time, how were you able to discern an actual rape allegation and a fraud one? Because there was a time during the course of Arewa Me Too, that was huge actually. There was a point you were not actually entertaining some other kind of allegations. And then some girls now created accounts and they were now narrating their own stories, saying that some people, saying that you and the crew refused to actually entertain their own allegations. So why? And then thirdly, when you were doing the whole thing, there were people actually who were part of the vehicle of the whole Arewa Me Too, who were saying that any guy who is not part of Arewa Me Too is actually a rape apologist. I was like, seriously?
Okay,
because
so those are your two. No,
sorry, please.
No, I asked for 1 minute.
Sorry, please.
You have to respect the moderator.
I'm actually begging you, please.
No, it's not
all
a
right,
begging
fine,
thing.
Fine.
So your question is, first question, how did she distinguish between rape, false allegations? And second is that, okay, your second question, Ogasa, thank you very much for respecting.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So, as regards to what you were talking about, so one thing we all have to understand is that Arewa Me Too does not have an ownership, right? It's a platform that anyone can use as a safe space to talk about their experiences. It's not owned by anyone. And the reason, that specific incident that you're talking about is that, yes, a young lady that I believe was scared enough to hide behind an anonymous account came out, created a new account to talk to allege someone of raping her. So the reason I didn't, carry that is because I didn't know who she was, right? I had been in her DMs, sent a lot of messages, had no way of talking to her. It's not that I was gonna ask questions of, okay, where were you, where did you guys meet? But no, because once you open this the space for someone to come out, there are other people that they've abused actually come out and talk about that same person. And that's what happened with one of the guys that we carried. It was that, okay, one person with her identity came out, and then we were getting calls. People from the secondary school are like, oh, they know him, he's always parked outside. So, a pedophile, right? In secondary schools going after, young girls. So, and, we can't control, no one can control the Me Too movement anyway. Because at the end of the day, it's a safe space. Anyone can come out and decide to not be a victim, right? To unveil what has happened to them. But it's whether or not we carried that on does not delegitimize what that girl was talking about. I can only talk about what I can confirm, right?
Okay, Fakria, I'm really sorry. We actually have to end it here. But I want to address something Daisy asked, which was, sorry, Natalia, but we have to round up. When things are happening that you're not sure you should engage with. And one of the things we as women are not taught is how to respond when we feel uncomfortable in our bodies. We're constantly second guessing whether what is being done to us is assault. And I think that as soon as in your head there is a question about, is this something I'm comfortable with? I would rather be considered irrational than be in a situation where, because I don't know, I'm in a situation where things are being done to me that I don't want. So it's important to know that you have the ability to say, I don't care if you're stroking my arm, I don't like it. Stop. The thinking of its validity is one of the things that makes us feel responsible for the things that are done to us. So there's no ownership of that. All right? Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your attention.
A good Kaba Fest appreciation. group photo, please. So while you're doing that, I just want to, there's some little bits of housekeeping. So